ski training is honestly ultra training. Like you go for a 4-hour run in the mountains and you bring snacks. Like that is ski training in the summer. And so as I was getting out and exercising again and like moving my body, that's what I gravitated towards, was just like doing long days on the trails by myself. And recognize that I could probably race if I wanted to. And so in 20, like kind of late 2015, and then in 2016, started doing trail stuff again.
This episode of the Smart Athlete Podcast is brought to you by Solpre. If you're active at all, whether you're running or simply out walking for the day, you've probably experienced one of the number one problems that active people have, and that's chafing. Solpre's all-new, all-natural anti-chafe balm solves that problem while feeding your skin the vital nutrients it needs to be healthy. If you'd like to stop chafing once and for all and treat your body right, go to solpre.com to check out the anti-chafe balm today. That's SOLPRI.com. Welcome to the Smart Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Funk. My guest today is a pro ultrarunner with Adidas Terrex. She's a CTS coach, an exercise physiologist, and a science writer. She's done a number of things running-wise, as well as some other stuff when she was younger I'm going to bug her about. But most notably, in recent years, has 2 top 10 finishes at the Western States. And currently, I believe, unless I'm wrong, she'll correct me here in a minute, has the fastest known time, I think, for a woman on the Tahoe Rim Trail. Welcome to the show, Corrine Malcolm.
I'm so happy to be here. And I still do currently have the fastest known time for supported women on the Tahoe Rim Trail. So fingers crossed, I get to hold on to that one for a long time.
I don't know how long like FKTs stand for in ultras, especially like, you know, the more popular stuff, whether it's like somebody sets it and it really stays around for a while, or whether it's just, you know, I have this perception that ultras are picking up in popularity, which may just be because I've had kind of a spate of ultra runners to talk to, but so I have this perception. I don't know whether it's like, just people are going to be coming to the sport and then it's like knocking down times, or whether it's more established and it's much harder to actually, you know, accomplish a new FKT.
It's a combination of those things. I always joke though too, it's like I want to get at the Colorado Trail before Courtney DeWalter gets there, because once she gets it, I don't know that it'll be broken. Same with like Caitlin Gerben on the Wonderland Trail here in the Seattle area. Like that's going to be a really hard time to beat. Chrissy Mail held the FKT on the Tahoe Rim Trail before me, and you know, could have been close to an untouchable time, but I think that was set in like 2016, I believe. So it was around for 5 years before I got to get after it. And I think that there's more time to shave off there for a woman. It's just going to take the person who wants to run 171 miles to go do it.
Right. So, I mean, that begs the question, you think about timing, how much does like the logistical planning of this is a good weather week, let's say, go into trail? Because, you know, we're before we got going, we're talking about like the difference between trail and road and time variations, both from altitude. And then obviously, you know, if a trail is sloppy, then you're going to lose time and it becomes, you know, monumental over 170-mile haul. You know, it's maybe if you lose 10% during a 5K, like the actual time limit, not huge, but you start multiplying that and the margin of error seems like it could be, you know, pretty significant.
Yeah, so I think it's there. I think it really is dependent on the route that you're going after and like what the norms and weather are. Like it's why, you know, you can't go on the Wonderland Trail at a certain time because it's still snowy. You can't go too late into the fall with Tahoe Rim Trail because it gets really windy and it gets really snowy. So I had watched Magda Belay the year before go after the Tahoe Rim Trail and actually have that issue where it was really, really windy and really, really cold. And then I had the issue where we delayed the Tahoe Rim Trail for 6 weeks because of smoke. We couldn't run because our national forests were completely closed for weeks on end. And so I postponed for 6 weeks. And it was like I postponed and then we postponed again. And then I was like, we're not going to do it. I'm going to do it unsupported with my friend and we're just going to go have a fun time on it. That got smoked out. So by the time we actually got after it, we had gone from August 28th being our start date to like middle of October being our start date. And then the week after I did it, they had like 120-mile-per-hour winds on the like ridge tops like a week later. So we like snuck it in perfectly in between everything. Part of that's luck and part of that's probably just patience and the ability to be flexible. Like I live or lived rather in San Francisco. And so I could like kind of wait it out and go after it once the weather actually kind of settled down and we could get on the trail again.
It, you know, maybe it's just my brain spazzing out a little bit, but sometimes I think about those kind of efforts and setting new record times, and like you said, just sneaking it in just so. And part of me goes, my brain starts to focus on like luck versus destiny, and like, do you have those stories that swell up in your mind as you're delaying, or do you just focus on the logistics?
I mean, I think it was really hard to be like, am I too tapered? Like when we were driving up to do the actual attempt, I texted my coach and I was like, hey, like, I don't care if we get the FKT or not. I just want to go run around the lake. And like, I just want to complete it. I want my season to be done. I want to stop dragging this out. Like I want to do this thing and then get to take a break. Like I want to go climbing with my husband and with our friends. And so I think it was easy to like doom and gloom it and think it was canceled a bunch and have the wind taken out of your sails. But at the end of the day, it was like I was going to do what I could. I was going to be hopeful that we could start, but um, you couldn't like dwell on that for too long by any means because it wasn't productive.
Oh, I'd like your opinion on, so something I noticed when I was racing collegiately was that the races where I could let go of the desire for a particular outcome. I mean, you make a plan, you say this is my pace and all that stuff, but then you just go, yeah, like I'm gonna have a good time, which is exactly what it sounded like you said. You're like, I just want to run around the lake, like I don't care anymore. Do you find that is the case for yourself, that if you can find yourself in a place of like, I really don't care anymore, not a I'm pretending not to care to get the thing, but I like a genuine place of no, like it's cool, whatever. Do you find yourself, running your better times in that kind of mindset?
I mean, I think that's my approach to racing, generally speaking. Like I'm a very process oriented person. And I tell my athletes this as well. It's like, okay, what do I need to do? Like I need to check the boxes every day. Like that's a success. Like those are my little goals. And it's like, okay, in the race, if you take care of yourself, like I'm eating, I'm drinking, I'm monitoring what I need to monitor, like the result you want should come from that, I think, as opposed to focusing on the result itself. Like that's how I was in high school. That's how I was about, like what being class rank in high school. I was like, oh, if I do my homework and I show up to school, like I should end up in this position. And that's the same with racing. It's not so much it's not to say that I'm not competitive or I don't want to perform well. It's the idea that like I'm taking care of the little things and I'm confident enough that if I have a good day and I take care of myself, that the result that I think I'm capable of, which hopefully is performing well and being competitive, will be a natural result of doing all those little things. So I think that was similar to the FKTs are different in the sense that like I'm not going to race against 100 other people and try to be at the front of that group. The FKT, like it's there's only one, there's a positive outcome and a not, I guess, negative outcome, right? Like in a race, it's like, oh, I'm going to be top 10. I'm going to run under this time,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. In a FKT, it's like I either get the FKT or I don't get the FKT. And so I think that sets it up a little bit different mentally, where in which it's like, I mean, maybe that's something I have to evaluate, right? Like in racing, I've gotten to the point where I can say, I'm doing the little things. This is the outcome I expect. I don't have to focus on the outcome. In FKT, it's like, I would love to run the Wonderland Trail, but I worry that I can't beat Caitlin. And if it's only beating Caitlin or not beating Caitlin, that's a harder thing to like
Mm-hmm.
not become outcome oriented. And so I don't know. Now I'm going to spiral on that probably for a little bit.
Oh no, I set you down a bad place. No, I mean, you've got all the pieces, right? Like, I understand. Believe me, I understand. Even though I don't perform at the same level you do, I think we all worry about similar things and our own particular flavor of those things. Um, but like, you've got all the pieces, just the ability and the practice to just, let's focus on, are my shoes tied? Are my socks dry? Like, do I have enough food? Did I take in my fuel at the right place? Am I, drinking the right thing at the right time? Did I bring my anti-chafe bomb? Did I lose it on the trail? Like, do I need to get another one? What, just all the little things. Sometimes I think it, it's a pro, like it's two parts. One, taking care of all those things really does take care of it. But then also, sometimes I feel like it's we are Linus, and that's like our safety blanket, right? Like, we can just focus on those things and hold on to our safety blanket of routine, and then we don't have to even worry about the other thing because our mind's occupied. It's not like reaching a place of Zen mastery where you're like, like I really don't care about the world. You
I
just
mean,
fill
things
your
can still
mind with
go
other
wrong.
things, right?
Like things can still go wrong. And that's like, you still have to like, you can't like, you still have to work through that when that happens. And that's like that psychological flexibility piece of like, there's still a box to check there for sure, of like being able to adapt when things, when anything in your little checklist falls apart. But I still think you can like probably keep that within the security blanket, maybe.
So, given that you obviously participate yourself and coach people, is there a hurdle or a stumbling block, something that goes wrong that sends people down that like mental death spiral more often than anything else? Is there anything that stands out as like, this is the most common way to send people down like a negative mental spiral?
I honestly think that one of the most common things people do is um, they get focused on that outcome goal. They focus on time. I want to run sub 24 hours. I want to run sub 8 hours. I want to run whatever. And they know what the splits are. And they know at this aid station, they need to be at this time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if they're not at that time, they fall apart. Like, how can they reach this goal? Like they don't have they don't have a value-based goal that's going to help steer the ship when that time-based goal, that outcome-based goal falls apart. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I feel like that's very philosophical, but I do think that that's the biggest thing. Like I tell athletes, time goals, like we're going to set up a time chart for your crew because your crew needs to not miss you at aid stations. But then the time goals aren't for you. Like you get to think about time at mile 80. You get to think about time at mile 35, wherever you're going into like that last, quarter, maybe last, I don't know, some small percentage of the race, last 20%.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can use whatever that arbitrary time is to like get you to the finish. But I think a lot of athletes unless you're like going for world records and this is like the only focus in your life, I think it's cool to run a sub 2400. I think these goals are not invaluable, but I think it's really easy to be so focused on that outcome goal that when that thing falls apart, because you have a low, because it's an ultra and you're going to have a low, like when that thing falls apart, I think it's really hard for athletes to like correct and get back on board.
What I think is interesting about, I'll say, human psychology is like our desire, at least runners, I would say probably other athletes as well, but runners to like grab onto these particular numbers and be like this is it. Like this is, like you said, sub 24-hour 100-mile race. Um, the sub 4-minute mile. Like we come up with these nice numbers, and if I'm like, I'm under this nice number, then I feel validated.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you step back, that setup is arbitrary to some degree, not entirely, but to some degree, it's arbitrary. Well, how I think a more realistic way to approach it is, one, like, what gradation or like what degree of separation is your current fitness from whatever thing you're after, number one. But then number two, where does that thing fit in the grand scheme of performance? The second part I don't think is as quite as informative for an individual athlete, but at the same time, give some context. So say like she wouldn't. So I'm not putting words in her mouth, but I had a guest on, Sherry Donahue, a few weeks ago, who runs ultras, and she is a self-described cutoff chaser. Like she runs in the back, she's just trying to make it to the end before the race calls it a day. If Sherry says, "Oh, I want to do a sub 24-hour 100-mile," is that realistic for her? I don't think
Probably depends on the
so,
race, but
but it could
probably,
depend on the race, right? So, but it's like in the context of where she is versus like the gradation of all ultra runners and how many are able to accomplish said task.
mhm.
Like I feel like that gives you a little more context to, am I setting myself up for failure?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, if your fitness really says that you can run a 5 hour marathon, but you want to break sub 3, like you're probably gonna be unhappy with that marathon,
Yeah.
right? But it's like, okay, are these stepping stones? Like you might start at a 4:45 and then run a 4 and then run a 3:30. Like these things are not impossible by any means, but it's like I think you can elucidate from someone's training, like what's within the realm of possibility for them. At the same time, I have athletes who they're faster than me, but like often like there are athletes who will get to a race and like I think they're underperforming sometimes. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like I know what you're capable of. Like what do we need to crack so that you can actually run to your potential? Like what does that actually look like? Um, because I've seen your threshold workouts, I've seen your long runs. Like I know what you're doing. So what mistake is happening once the gun goes off? Like where are we falling apart there or falling short there? Because I've definitely seen athletes, I've seen peers in the same boat where it's like, I think you're underperforming based on your training. But that's the thing about ultra running is like there's no one way to do it. And there's the marathon PRs do not equate to your 50-mile PR or a place in a hard race, right? Like there's many other factors at play that are going to determine performance at something like 100, right? The heat, the altitude, the course profile, your ability to eat or fuel yourself or hydrate and take care of those small tasks, like all those things all of a sudden are what are going to cause problems on race day,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of those things you can train away. Like a lot of those things, if you're properly trained for the course, for like the specificity of the race, you can train away some of those mistakes. But at the same time, like that's why I think experience in a lot of ways can reign supreme in ultra running. I think it's why ultra runners in their 40s are winning races.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they've got that experience under their belt, to handle when things go wrong, to take care of things before they go wrong. But I think kind of going back to your question about performance and time and maybe like setting someone up for success or failure,
Mm-hmm.
um, has a lot to do with like, you know, not falling into the comparison trap, but being honest with yourself. And then I think setting up a stretch goal and then like probably like an A goal and a B goal
Mm-hmm.
so that, when it comes to the race, if you do need that outcome goal to kind of drive you forward during it, it's like, okay, like, maybe that A goal is that thing that's like right at the cusp. That stretch goal is the thing that's like if everything goes perfectly type of thing, or even a little bit beyond that. Um, like a lofty goal, and then a B or C goal are things that are like well within your realm of ability, and that could even be finishing. I think finishing the race, be it a 5K or a 200 miler, like that can be the bottom goal or the back goal or whatever it is. And then I think you can have degrees that work up all the way to your stretch goal as far as how are you going to define success, and then like having value oriented goals, like what's most important to you, I think is kind of that side conversation that becomes really important. Once again, like very philosophical, not necessarily physiological at all. But I mean, I don't know what percent of the sports, quote unquote mental. So I think it's important to recognize that there is kind of this philosophical, psychological conversation going on.
I mean, if you listen to my eighth grade coach, it's 90% mental and 10% physical. So,
I like that.
it's pretty, I think it's pretty accurate. It's
Mhm.
just, your mind will will you through a 50-mile race, even if you haven't trained for it, if you have just a strong enough mind.
Yeah. I mean, I have athletes who average like 40 miles a week.
Hmm.
They have like slightly bigger weeks with some long runs or a targeted race or something who can run hundreds successfully. And I've got athletes who put in 120-mile weeks and can run 100 successfully and everything in between. So I think that's and aren't like, not to say, and are performing maybe at comparable levels even.
Hmm.
And so it's like, yes, part of that's talent, part of that's quality over quantity, part of that's understanding, maybe that athlete's fragile and like breaking themselves constantly is not going to elicit a good race result either. So I think it's, that is the beauty in maybe ultra and trail running is that there isn't really one way, even at the upper echelon of the sport. None of us are training the exact same volume, intensity, all that kind of stuff. Like there's little variations, I think, on the theme there.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the hardest thing for maybe new people to running at any distance to kind of come to is like there is a certain amount of increase in mileage that you need to do to increase your aerobic capacity.
Mhm.
Just point blank, big aerobic capacity, you got a big aerobic engine, you're going to be more, you're going to perform better to your own ability than otherwise.
Yep.
But it comes with limits. And I've talked to, I don't know how many different people, some people who can maintain higher mileage, some people who cannot. And regardless of now I'm forgetting his name right now. Previous guest who was like a pretty good 10K runner in college, like 28s, somewhere around there, 28, 29 minutes, who kept like breaking every year as the coach wanted to run 800-mile weeks. And his senior year, he finally was like, I'm going to run 40 miles a week. I'm not going to run more. And then had his best year because he wasn't broken all year.
Yeah.
And it's like, he was able to perform better than his, but like, I think sometimes people hear that and they go, okay, well then all I need to do is run 30, 40 miles a week. And that's all I need to do. And I'll be awesome. Like,
Mhm.
well, no, you may actually need to run more miles. We
Yep.
don't know until we figure out more about your particular like physiological stressors and ability to adapt and recovery and all those kind of things.
Yeah. It's not, a one size fits all training plan or training program. People get stuck in comparison, like so and so is doing this, so I should do that.
Mm-hmm.
But it takes kind of finding where that limit is and
Mm-hmm.
understanding what your goals are too. Like I've seen athletes who it's like, I'm convinced, not my personal athletes, like peers in the sport who or friends where I'm like, I think you could train less and do better. Or I think you have capacity to train a little bit more consistently and do better. It's like I see potential in people. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could. It's not my place to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. But like if I was in charge, I would tweak it this way or that way. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting to kind of see to bear witness to that, I guess is
Mm-hmm.
what I would say. But people are gonna people. Can't control them all, and that's okay.
Yeah. Um, Thinking about comparisons, though, I wanted to ask you a little bit about. I read an article. I think it was on I Run Far. You published recently. I think it was just a couple weeks ago, talking about running as we age and the physiological changes that we go through. So feel free to fill us in both with some numbers and physiological facts, as well as my curiosity in terms of um, comparing yourself to your younger self or not. I mean, there's a point when we all reach, if we continue to run through our lives, where we're basically trying to slow down as little as we can rather than get faster. And, I think I find myself already there, just given my background and my interest. I like shorter stuff. I do like 5K, 10K. It's going to be near impossible for me to maintain the same kind of training I was doing when I was in college. So I want to ask you about what does happen, and then how do you deal with the game, so to speak, of competing with now instead of competing with the past?
Yeah, it's super interesting. It was a fun article to write, but also like we had a lot of back and forth with our editing team. So I write a monthly column for iRunFar called Running on Science, and it comes out the third Tuesday of every month, I think. And we've been doing it since like 2018, which kind of feels weird that we've been doing this for years now. So I've written a lot of things for that space. But the aging athlete was an interesting topic in that we've touched on it in bits and pieces in different articles. I wrote about joint replacement. I've written about cardiovascular health, kind of some implications out of some narrative papers that have come out from like Nick Tiller and other such folks. Nick's brilliant. I think he's one of the smartest guys. Kind of on the outside of the sport a little bit, like he himself runs ultras, but he works at UCLA doing respiratory science. There he's a PhD, super brilliant, but trying to figure out, what are the things, the biggest variables for folks. And I think it's natural. Like the biggest declines generally are related to lean muscle mass. And part of that's largely due to hormonal profiles. Women go through menopause. So generally speaking, we go through it before men do, before our male peers, in that it's harder for us to maintain muscle mass starting even in our 40s, potentially. And then for men, that generally starts at later, like in their 60s, and declines at such and such percent. I'd have to pull up the article in front of me, every decade thereafter. And so that's going to be related to being able to maintain that high VO2 max as well. Like lean muscle mass is pretty closely tied to VO2 max in that it's like milliliter per kilogram, generally speaking, or per minute per kilogram. And so that muscle mass is really important. I think that's the biggest thing that kind of sends people slowly down. Injury, like we recover more slowly. We don't synthesize protein as well, which is part of that recovery process. That's where like ingesting protein at the right time is one of those ways that we can battle that. Like it becomes way more important. Lifting weights becomes way more important once again, because you're trying to generate protein synthesis. You're trying to increase that to maintain muscle mass and maintain just like healthy function in general. And I think and then being able, that I think allows you to maintain training. And that was the other biggest factor we saw, was like being able to maintain some training volume and some intensity was the biggest thing that kind of prolonged, I would say, like that success in sport, or prolonged the slowing down period, was being able to maintain training, because it could be motivational. It can be time restrictions. It can be ageism. Ageism is a huge factor here. And that was a really interesting part of the conversation that when I started writing it, I wasn't really thinking about, but through communicating with our editorial team and some masters in the community, that was a big, like ageism is a huge factor as far as like keeping people motivated in sport. They don't feel like they belong in sport. They feel like the cutoffs are too hard. It's like, why would I do this? They're told that they're frail, like all these things. Like every single article I read literally started with like decline, like this really, kind of aggressive, like you're declining mentality, as opposed to being like, okay, like exercise is good for your health in general. How do we allow that to occur for as long as possible? And we heard from all sorts of athletes in the aftermath of that article coming out, as far as like how they felt about it, how they felt about their own aging and their own performance. We had athletes who they ran in their 20s and 30s and then took some time off, and then actually been setting like lifetime PRs because they came back as a master's athlete. And they feel grateful that they, didn't run in college, because they wouldn't win that comparison game. I personally work with an athlete who was a very fast marathoner in his 20s and now is in his 60s. And there are days like that. I feel like that's what we've worked on for a lot of the last 2 years, is not feeling bad about himself when like he still is going out and like running like eights. Like he runs faster than me most days. But he was a very fast marathoner in his 20s, and 40 years later, he's not going out and running 6:30s all the time. And
Right.
so like that comparison, like, so the ageism from society and community, and I think, and that self comparison more than like cross peer comparison, are the hardest things for people. Once again, like I'm sitting here as an almost 32-year-old. So I've got, I have decades maybe before this, is me. And that was another comment too, is a lot of people felt like, yes, 40s, like technically 40 is considered a master's athlete, but man, 40 seems young. Like just kind of talking about how like we think this conversation should actually be about 60s and 70s and 80s. which I don't disagree with. I'm just, I'm here to report what the literature says and
Hmm.
then start a conversation around what the literature is saying. So kind of big points there are that, quote, yes, we are, fighting decline, and that sounds really negative. Um, and generally speaking, that's predominantly linked to things like the slowing down of like regeneration, protein synthesis, all that kind of stuff. So some of that we can't necessarily fight. But it actually turns out that like continuing to train is one of our best ways to stave it off. And that there are people who are super satisfied masters athletes. And I think that is really great to hear. I think that we had a comment on a Trail Society podcast recently in which we were talking about a woman who set an age group record for like 70 to 74, I want to say, and like the indoor mile. She ran like a 6:31 indoor mile, like
Hmm.
wow. And I think one of us made a comment like made a comment along the lines of like we all said like, oh, I hope I'm running when I'm 70. I
Hmm.
hope I would love to run a sub 10-minute mile when I'm 70. And I think we said
Hmm.
like, oh, I hope that I'm like, not using a cane when I'm 70. And we had someone write into us and say, um, like that was like, I just want you to know, like, we are like really happy masters athletes, blah, blah, blah. And I get it. Like, I get like, um, I want to like help support masters athletes and make them feel like they're not like fighting a losing battle, that they
Hmm.
like that running is fulfilling, racing is fulfilling, that they've got competitive. Some of them want to go, and this is all runners in general. Some of us want to go smell the flowers, and some of us like have time goals and place
Hmm.
goals. And I think that's independent of age, right? Like that's you can enjoy running in any of those various shapes and forms. But I think we oftentimes lump masters athletes into the like, if they have any competitive drive, we like, I don't know, it's kind of like, um, what word am I looking for here? It's kind of like patronizing, maybe,
Hmm.
to be like, oh, you're so cute, you're
Like, oh,
70,
that's cute. That's
did this
exactly what I
thing.
thought of.
And it's like, we need to not do that, right? We need
Right.
to, I think we need to encourage, like, create some different cutoffs, or say there's a 50K and a 50 mile. This was a Liza Howard recommendation at a race. Like, let's make the 50K cutoff the same as the 50-mile cutoff, so that if there are people in the 50K, like the course has to be marshaled that entire time. Why not allow the 50K runners who might not be able to make that 50-mile cutoff but can make the 50K cutoff to do that thing?
Hmm.
So kind of trying to find ways to support and encourage, our 60s, 70s, 80s-year-old runners to feel like they're part of the community, as opposed to being patronizing. And I feel like through Trail Society and talking about all these topics, we've had a lot of like, oh yeah, we were really wrong about that, or how we talk about this is inappropriate. So I feel like it was a lesson in ageism for me writing the article, just in general, to understand like how different communities feel about getting older and what it's like to be a master's athlete.
There's a lot to unpack there.
There's a lot. Sorry, that was my rant on ageism.
No, that's fine. Um, first, so talking about master starting at 40, I, I don't necessarily have a problem with that cutoff, generally speaking, because I think, there are obviously exceptions in the ultra running community, but generally speaking, Tom Brady aside, most professional athletes, people at the peak of their physical fitness, are going to be sub 40, just
Yeah.
across the board. Sometimes like 25 is, like
Yeah, in ultra endurance sports, I think it skews a little bit longer, just because
right,
there's something to be said about years of even like Nordic skiing and that kind of stuff,
right.
cycling. Like you'll see athletes performing at a super high level, maybe even peaking in their 30s. So I think it extends our
Yes, for
sport
for
life a
in,
little
for
bit.
endurance runners, I think peak is closer to 35, and it's getting a little bit older as we're getting, I think, better with nutrition, better with um, being smart about recovery and avoiding injury and all that kind of stuff. So like I get it from the other side of being, I'm not yet there, but will be soon or sooner than I think. So, I can kind of peer that direction and go like, I get it. Being on the other side of that, you're like, I'm locked out. I'm forever this masters athlete. But again, I think it comes back to like, in part that looking at, I come from a math background, so this is just my bend. Looking at like the gradations of times and where am I on the distribution, and just being realistic about like this is usually the performance of somebody my age, and then how do I stack up?
Mhm.
Coming back to that. But some of the recommendations in the article talking about like changing cutoffs or having like easily visible FKTs for age groups of
Yeah,
a
like
particular
eight.
course
Yeah, like
or
age course records, I think are really
right,
cool.
right.
Western States does a great job with that, for example. We really like Western States really celebrates its age group records. For example, Ragna DeBots set an age group. She set the Masters record as
Mm-hmm.
she's 42 at Western States last year when she was second, like in one of the fastest times ever. So it's like, I think it's really cool to celebrate that. I think they've also celebrated, when it's like, oh, they're going after the 60 to 65-year-old record or the
Mm-hmm.
70 plus record like that. I think that is cool to celebrate. Like when I ran Leadville in 2017,
Mm-hmm.
the person who got the most round of applause was the one guy in the 70 plus age group,
Mm-hmm.
because they do the top male, top female for the whole race, and then they do top 3 age groups for
Right,
the age groups. Like that's
right.
that's the awards they give out. And he got by far a much louder round of applause than like Ian Sharman and Devin Yanko, who won the race. Like that was very, very cool. So I do think like that stuff is really beneficial.
In some ways, I think that talking about masters athletes, especially as you get in the older categories. So, for you, the listener, and I know you didn't do track collegiately, or pretty sure you didn't in cross country skiing, I believe.
Mhm.
Um, there are open track meets that you can go to that are collegiate meets. Typically, the higher up the school is towards like Division 1 in the NCAA, the less likely it is to be an open meet. But there are plenty of open opportunities for people to go compete at any age. And there's like 100-meter, 200-meter sprints, and then they're age graded. So like if you want to do the 100-meter, you actually aren't always doing 100 meters. Like you'll have a shorter distance depending on your age, and it's great. It's graded to try to make it fair. So I think there's some exposure in like looking at that, and you go, oh, like these guys are having trouble running 100 meters. But then if I think about like endurance runners, like who is the epitome of, I guess this is the thing I say to myself, is like, what is the core of an endurance runner? To me, the words, I will endure,
Mhm.
simply, whatever it is. Who else is the embodiment of that than somebody in their 70s or 80s who's still out there doing it? You know
Yeah,
what I
I feel like
mean?
the
Like,
Dipsy is so cool. You've seen the Dipsy race
mm-mm,
maybe? It
no.
happens in June every year in Mill Valley, California, so just north of San Francisco, and it's an age and gender graded event.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts from Mill Valley. They go up the Dipsy, so it's called Dipsy. It's on the Dipsy Trail, and it runs from Mill Valley to Stinson Beach. So it's like 6 miles, I want to say 7 miles.
Mm-hmm.
Basically climbs one, it's basically a big climb and then a big descent, more or less. But they start in waves, and it's age graded and gender graded. So you'll have like 70-year-old women and like 9-year-old boys starting together.
Mm-hmm.
And the top, it's so, basically like based on gender and age, the fastest people are starting at the back, and they've got to run through all these people. And you get a black shirt if you're in the top 30 with your finishing number on it. And so it's a big
Mm-hmm.
deal to get a black shirt. I mean, like 1,000 people do this race. It's kind of wild. And oftentimes the person with the fastest course time doesn't win, because it's the person who gets across the finish line first that wins.
Mm-hmm.
And so routinely it's like a 56-year-old woman or a 62-year-old guy. Like it's very cool to watch. And then like Alex Varner, who's in our sport, or has, I think he's officially I think he's officially retired now, but he's had the fastest Dipsy time for years, and he'll be like second or maybe third. And then like in fourth will be like a 12-year-old boy, or, like a 12-year-old girl. Like it's really cool to see like this, like the top 30 people to make it across the line at the end of it. And it's like a bunch of old guys, a bunch of ladies, like a bunch of like kids. Like it's pretty funny to like look at this like cohort of athletes based on this like gender and age graded.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's really it's the only race that I know that does it. And it's like made even more complicated because the course is like pretty narrow. So like passing is very hard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's like very wild to watch. To watch it every year. It happens, it's generally like the second weekend of June. Um, and it's very short and fast and furious, but it's like a big deal. Like you have to apply. There's generally bribes involved to try to get in. Like it's a whole thing. But it's like the Mount Marathon of
Mm-hmm.
the Bay Area, essentially, where it's like a lot of locals, but some fast people will come in, and it's a really cool race. But I love the age grading and the gender grading of it, just to kind of like see how it all plays out. Like it's a very cool finish line.
That see now, like I hadn't heard of the race before, and
Now you're gonna
not
go deep dive into it.
well, not really deep dive, but also I'm like, I have like secret plans of becoming a race director, and I've had race director at least one race director on the show that I know I can go to him. Um, Ian, what's your last name? He's the race director for Run Ottawa. It's like a race with like 40,000 people in it.
Cool.
Anyway, Ian Fraser, he's a former pro triathlete. Um, so now I'm like I talk to people, I hear these different cool like race ideas. The Twilight 5000, which is run by
Yeah.
Tracksmith. I'm like, I want to do that, and I'm like, I want to do just quirky things. It's like quirky, but very accessible. I mean, that's the cool thing about that race idea, right? Is like most races, 99% of races, the fastest people are at the front at the finish line trying to win, right?
Yeah.
Whereas that setup, I mean, it's a wild card. I think that's really cool. Because how many
Yeah.
times what other opportunities do you have for such a mix of people to try to be the first across the line or the top 10 across the line or what, like,
Yeah. It's super cool. It's why biathlon. So I did biathlon. I skied in a
yeah.
circle with a firearm for a long time, or basically a circle. And that's why I think, although I love cross country skiing in general, like that's biathlon is so interesting because like, yeah, you can be really fast, but man, if you have a bad day on the shooting range,
Mm-hmm.
like you can be in the last stage of a race head to head even, and like have someone have a bad day, and the race results can change dramatically. And so I think that provides like a little bit more engagement to have this other component to the race, that I don't know, like it's not a given that you've got the highest VO2 max you're going to win type of
Yeah.
thing. Because that's cross country skiing oftentimes. Besides, there are tactics obviously in any of these
Right.
sports, but I do think that like the shooting, having the skill component added to it, makes it very interesting.
So maybe before we go, I did want to ask you about the transition from cross country skiing to biathlon. You were with the national team, I think, for a while, and then into ultras. So, I mean, what's that journey like?
Yeah, so I mean I skied collegiately at Montana State. And I ran on loan for the cross country team. It was kind of a comical experience in which I trained with the ski team, but raced with the cross country running team. And
Mm,
as you can imagine, did not make me maybe phenomenally well liked on the women's cross country team because I didn't go to any practices. Um,
yeah.
but I had a good time. It was really fun, and skied collegiately and actually dropped out of school to pursue biathlon. Kind of got an offer to go be part of the junior national team. I was still a junior athlete for one more year. So dropped out of school, packed up my car, was like, maybe I'll come back next year, maybe I won't. Like, worked it out with the athletic department so that if I did come back, I wouldn't be forfeiting eligibility by being gone for this year. And so, because in skiing, you have a 5 year clock. Once your clock starts, you have 5 years to complete your eligibility. And in Nordic skiing, you can't be older than a certain age. All of Nordic skiing is Division 1, and so I think it falls under a bunch of those rules.
Hmm.
And it protects athletes from like older European athletes coming in as like 28-year-olds and destroying everyone. So there's an age cutoff for collegiate skiing, um, which wasn't going to be an issue, but I had 5 years to compete if I wanted them. And so I left, made junior worlds that year, went to Europe, raced European championships, podiumed at European championships, made the national team. So I dropped out of school, and 8 months later, I made the senior national team. So I wasn't going back to school. I moved into the Olympic Training Center in Lake Placid, which was a super wild experience. So like I am like very good friends with like all the obscure sports superstars, like Alana Myers, who's now the most decorated Black winter Olympian, I think, of all time, winning medals in the bobsled again this year. So I feel like that's a really weird niche. I'm going to call them celebrities, to have lived with for 3 years. So was on the team from 2010 until 2014-ish. I did like going into the 2014 Olympics, essentially lost my spot on the team because I had moved back to Montana to kind of seek out like a more like emotionally stable place to train. The Olympic Training Center is pretty intense, and like the team I think is in a much healthier spot than it was at that point. But basically was really burnt out. And so instead of going to the Olympics in 2014, I enrolled in 21 credits at school. I went back to school full time. I was really like sick, burnt out, whatever you want to call it. Likely fits, every criteria for overtraining syndrome. Very last stop on the train there. Pretty broken. And so took a bunch of time off, went back to school. But ski training is honestly ultra training. Like you go for a 4-hour run in the mountains and you bring snacks. Like that is ski training in the summer. And so as I was getting out and exercising again and like moving my body, that's what I gravitated towards, was just like doing long days on the trails by myself. And recognize that I could probably race if I wanted to. And so in kind of late 2015 and then in 2016 started doing trail stuff again, which turned into ultra stuff. Because I think it was my dad. I'm sure I've been quoted as saying this before. I did my first, I did like a 50K and some like sky running type stuff. And my dad pulled me aside and was like, Corey, I think you'd be really good if you went longer. Like, I think that would really suit you very well, probably because I'm stubborn and I've been stubborn since I was very small. So went from, doing that to diving into the ultra community just to see if I could do it. And I think that was 2016, that summer, ran my first ultras, and it kind of spiraled out of control from there. By 2017, I ran my first 100. 2018 and 2019, I ran Western States, like kind of, dove fully back into a sport again. And got very fortunate that, one, my body handled it pretty well. Two, I had good support and guidance, and was really happy doing it. And that I wanted to like compete and see how I felt about racing and comparison and stacking up against people. And found that despite having this like long chunk of being in a kind of a dark place with overtraining, had kind of come out of that. It took a long time for me to, one, feel fresh again. Like I had a run where I was like, oh, this is what freshness feels like. And it also took a long time, I think until honestly like the last year or so, to really feel like I could take myself seriously as an athlete again. And that's saying that as someone who just finished a 3-year contract with Adidas and re-signed a 3-year contract. So I would say that people would assume, and I probably should be taking it seriously given that I have a contract, but I don't think it was until like the last 18 months or so that I was like, I think I'm healthy enough, like mentally, to take myself seriously. Like my approach to ultra running up to this point has been kind of a laid back casual approach, because if I don't quote unquote care about it too much, I like can't get hurt by it. Having done that in a totally different sport already. So I think it's kind of cool to like feel like I'm at equilibrium with a lot of that. So I do stretch periodically now, and I do try to drink my recovery drink now, and I prioritize getting sleep. So I think it's a good place to be. But yeah, I had a long, winding, like messy kind of ski and biathlon career that accelerated really rapidly and then like decelerated very rapidly. But it's been I wanted to try ultra running in part too, because I really love to travel and I love getting to see different countries on my feet. And so it was an opportunity too, to like do that, to go to Europe, I've gone to Hong Kong, I've gone to India. I've gotten to travel to some really cool, weird places like with running now. And so places that I didn't get to go when I did skiing and biathlon, because you race in Western Europe when you do biathlon. So it's very fun to get to be in a sport that's taken me to some really cool places over the last 3 years.
It seems, I mean, maybe it's just a matter of hindsight's 2020, that kind of thing. But it seems like maybe the leap from one to the other isn't quite as far as I might want to make it out to be in my brain. I think just being from the Midwest, I mean, there are people who do winter sports, but generally speaking, it's so far from my own little world that I'm like, you're on these ski things. Like, what are these things that you're strapping to your feet? Whereas like really, like it's just you're another class of endurance runner or endurance athlete. It's just it's not quite as devoid
Yeah.
from the sport as my brain
No.
wants to make it out to
I
be.
mean, I grew up in northern Wisconsin. I grew up the American Birkebeiner, which is the largest ski race in North America,
Mhm.
finishes on Main Street of the town I grew up in.
Yeah.
So I grew up, we call it, I feel like they call them silent sports. It's like, oh, things that are popular are like trail running and Nordic skiing and snowshoeing and open water kayaking, like things that are like calm, quote unquote, silent sports.
Hmm.
Like grew up in those communities, and so I don't think it was a big, skiing to me is like it's like Minnesota cross country skiers. Courtney DeWalter cross country skied in college. Garrett Heath, or not in college. I don't know. She didn't ski in college. High school, like high school skiers, right? That are currently ultra running are like Courtney DeWalter, Steph Howe. Garrett Heath is supposedly going to come run some trail stuff, but has had a very good track career professionally. Like they all grew up in the Minnesota cross country ski world. Um,
Hmm.
so it's kind of funny looking back on those results because a bunch of runners names. Ben True, super good American road runner, he skied collegiately, he skied at Dartmouth, but also grew up cross country skiing in Minnesota. So there's like these weird endurance ties, and I think it's because cross country skiers have an immense, not need, but they are really good at suffering because the sport hurts a whole lot. And so I
Hmm.
think that it's akin to like the 10K runner in a lot of ways. Like you're good at every minute of that race hurts, and it's a
Yeah.
lot of minutes.
Right.
Every minute of a 6K hurts, um, and it's not an insignificant amount of minutes to hurt for. And so I think that translates super well to ultra running, in which many minutes actually feel really good, but you could have an hour of feeling really terrible, and
Hmm.
you've survived probably worse. So I think
Hmm.
that like inherently Nordic skiers have been trained to like thrive in those environments.
As a shameless plug for myself, and not really myself, but taking it way back, Stephanie Howe was a very early guest on the podcast back on episode 19. So if you're
She's
interested in
amazing.
her, check that out. So as we're wrapping up here, you'll get a different question than she did. Every year I do a different question that I ask every single guest for that season.
Cool.
Um, so this season's question I'm asking everybody is, well, the question is, because people don't do this enough, so I'm hoping you do, talking about kind of value judgments on racing. How do you celebrate your wins?
Oh, so many different types of wins, so many different ways to celebrate.
Hmm.
Um, I don't want to say food stuff because food shouldn't be a reward. You should just enjoy food, like point blank, right? So it's not like that.
Okay.
Um, Celebrate my wins. What kind of wins? Big wins? Little wins?
You you get to decide what that means. It's a very open-ended question.
I'm not stumped. I will come up with something. How do I celebrate my wins? I think you have to give yourself time to let them sink in a little bit because sometimes it might not feel like a win right away, or it might not be like oh, I won the race type of win, right? Like I've won by like writing an aggressive email before where I was like, yes, I stood up for myself. That felt great. But I do think it's important to let them sink in and to realize that you've done a good job. Um, because I don't think wins are always this like really clear cut thing of like you were the first to cross the finish line. Um, Hopefully people have wins in there every day. Um, I used to have to keep an accomplishment journal so that I like could check, at the end of my day, be like, okay, like what did I accomplish today? I
Hmm.
need a positive. if you've been depressed, you know what I'm talking about. But I do think that like that's important to recognize that like wins and accomplishments aren't these big things. Sometimes they're, I put on hard pants today, like I put on jeans
Right.
or that kind of thing. But me, I'll also like be like, I get a mocha today because I went for my long run in the rain. So I think it's like, it can look different for different points in time and different, styles of win. But I do think just like give yourself a moment to like enjoy it and then, kind of do whatever you got to do next.
Corinne, you do a lot of different things. So I know there's a lot of different places that people can get in touch with you. If they want to, listen to more of what you have to say, read your stuff, any of that kind of stuff, where can they find you?
Oh my goodness, yes. I wear too many hats. For sure. You can find me. I'm not creative. My name is my name. If you can spell my name, you can find me. And so I'm on Instagram at Corrine Malcolm. I'm pretty active on Twitter at Corrine Malcolm. I don't, my like website and blog is pretty out of date, so I wouldn't necessarily use that. You can find my science writing at I Run Far under the Running on Science column. And then you can find me hosting the CTS Train Right podcast alongside Adam Pulford and the Trail Society podcast alongside Hillary Allen and Keely Henninger.
Corinne, thanks for hanging out with me today.
Yeah, it was amazing. Thank you.